Welcome to Birmingham, Britain's second city and my home for many years. Let me take you on a mildly Christmas-themed ghost tour of some of the haunted sites in this city.
If you're new here, hi, I'm Juliet. I'm a writer and historian, and on this channel I explore myth, legend, folklore, ghost stories, and weird and wonderful history in general. If you're not new here and you're looking for Freya the corgi, I'm afraid I couldn't bring her with me on this one, as I was spending the morning having brunch and going to the German Christmas market with my friends Christina and Katrina. But don't worry, I'll still put the traditional cute clip of Freya on the end of the video. In the Domesday Book from 1086, Birmingham is listed as a small manor. The town started to develop in 1166 when the lord of the manor was given a royal charter by King Henry II to hold a weekly market at his castle at Birmingham. This transformed Birmingham into a market town built around the Bullring markets and St Martin's Church. By the 1520s, it was the third biggest town in Warwickshire. Birmingham was especially well positioned to take advantage of increasing industry, as iron and coal from what would later be known as the Black Country could easily be transported to manufacturers in Birmingham. But it was the Industrial Revolution that really led to the rise and increase in size of Birmingham. As well as its geographical advantages, the raw materials from the Black Country, its central position, both at the crossroads of major road networks and at the heart of the new canal network built during the late 1700s, Birmingham was also the home of the Lunar Society of Birmingham, a dining club made up of industrialists, philosophers and scholars. And Birmingham became one of the most important towns, along with other cities like Manchester and Liverpool, through the Industrial Revolution in Britain. Along with several other towns and cities, it experienced something of a population explosion during the early 19th century. Birmingham had a population of 73,670 in 1801, which had grown to 146,986 in 1831. As the 19th century went on, the population grew to over 500,000, and it became the second biggest population centre in the UK, hence the attribute Britain's second city, whatever Manchester says, and yes, all three of Britain's biggest cities are tiny villages in comparison to somewhere like Dallas-Fort Worth, but we're a small island. Birmingham was granted city status by Queen Victoria in 1889, and the existing Church of St Philip's became the cathedral seat of the newly created Church of England Diocese of Birmingham in 1905. Ironically, this was many years after the building of St Chad's Roman Catholic Cathedral, which was built between 1839 and 1841 and became the first Roman Catholic cathedral in England since the Reformation in 1850. The city's university, located out in the suburb of Edgbaston, was founded in 1900, and it's where I did my undergrad degree and my PhD, having briefly defected to Bristol for my master's. That's much further out than the area we're focusing on today, though, as this walking ghost tour is restricted to the city centre.
I am armed with Haunted Birmingham by Arthur Smith and Rachel Bannister. The start for my tour is the Alexandra Theatre.
The Alexandra Theatre was built between 1900 and 1901 and has operated more or less continuously ever since, with occasional exceptions like, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic. It's also, as I discovered as I went through the write-up on it in my sourcebook, apparently haunted by a comically large number of ghosts.
One of the 20th century owners of the Alexandra Theatre was Leon Solberg. He passed away in his office in September 1937. What had formerly been Leon's office became a bar called the Solberg Suite. One day, a cleaner was vacuuming this room when she saw a figure walk towards the plug socket, lean down and pull the plug for the vacuum out of the wall. Then he waved it at her. She said she recognised the man from photographs as Leon Solberg. She left that day and never came back. Leon's office then became the Footlights Bar, and it was believed that if actors drinking in the bar felt a ghostly tap on their shoulder, it would be Leon telling them he was happy for them to work there again. Another superstition arose that if Leon's ghost was seen in the auditorium on the night of a dress rehearsal of a pantomime, the show would be a success. On one occasion in the Footlights Bar, several people saw a bottle of champagne and 4 glasses being lifted by unseen hands, moved through the air and set down further on the bar. People have also noticed the smell of cigar smoke quite often in the bar, and of course Leon enjoyed a cigar. There is another ghost in the Alex as well. This is believed to be a man who ran the wardrobe department who also died in his office. When he was alive, his slippered footsteps could be heard on the concrete and wood floor of the corridor. These distinctive footsteps were still heard regularly after he died, even years later when the whole corridor had been carpeted, and that noise shouldn't have been possible anymore. He was also seen by an actress starring in the Scottish play. One evening, an old gentleman she didn't recognise passed her on the stairs. He wished her a good evening, continued up the stairs. She asked the crew who it was. They said they hadn't seen anybody, but the description she gave matched the wardrobe master. And we are not done with the ghosts of the Alex yet. There is another ghost who is seen wearing a uniform and a top hat. On one occasion, people were painting a large backcloth which was spread out on the stage and had their backs to the auditorium. 4 times they felt an icy chill and turned to face the auditorium but saw nothing. The 5th time they saw the exit curtain at the back of the dress circle open and close again. The 6th time they saw a dark figure come through the exit curtain at the back of the stalls. It was dressed in military uniform with brass buttons and a top hat. They did not feel afraid, but watched the shape move down the stalls toward the orchestra pit, where they heard a sound like coins dropping onto a concrete floor. The shape then passed through a closed door leading to the backstage area. The figure in uniform and a top hat was also seen at the back of the stalls by a cleaner who was at the front of the stage. The Alex is also said to be haunted by an old stage manager called Dick Turner, who kept a large set of keys hanging from his belt, and you can hear the sound of jangling keys moving around the theatre as well. People have also heard footsteps running around the stage when there's nobody there. One person saw a pair of legs in jeans and work boots that didn't seem to be attached to anything go through a door, as in a closed door. Another cleaner once heard old-fashioned music hall style music, and a figure has been seen at the front of the stalls that wasn't identified. Whether some of these are the same ghost doing a lot of different stuff, or whether there's just dozens of ghosts in there, I don't know. It's starting to sound like a sitcom. But we will move on to our next destination, which is another haunted theatre.
Haunted theatres are a cliché for a reason, and I could almost see my next destination already, which was just down the road from the Alex. The Old Rep Theatre was the first purpose-built repertory theatre in the UK when it was built in 1913, though operations have recently been taken over by the Crescent Theatre, which is another less haunted theatre further out in Brindley Place.
Our next stop is the Old Rep Theatre behind me, which is also haunted by about a half a dozen ghosts, but just briefly, people have a feeling that somebody is watching them or waiting for them just around the corner, but it's not an unpleasant feeling, it's just a feeling. People have heard footsteps in various places around the theatre. A clock once fell off a wall for no apparent reason, and stacked metal chairs were dragged across the floor of a rehearsal room.
I still didn't need to walk very far on this walking tour, as my next stop was actually in between the Alex and the Old Rep. New Street Station and the huge modern complex called Grand Central, which was built over the top of it a few years ago. An Act of Parliament in 1846 allowed London and North Western Railway to demolish around 70 houses in the centre of what was at that time a very, very big town and build New Street Station, which was in use from 1851. It was officially opened in 1854. In 1879, another Act of Parliament gave Midland Railway permission to buy more land so they could extend the Birmingham West Suburban Railway into New Street. This involved the forced removal of half the remains in the local Jewish cemetery to Witton Cemetery further out. Because there was an Act of Parliament for it, the Jewish community could not object, or they could not successfully object. The original station was demolished between 1964 and 1966, and a new one opened in 1967. In 1971, the Birmingham Shopping Centre, later the Palisades Shopping Centre, opened directly above it, so that most entrances and exits for the station went through this shopping centre. This was my first ever view of Birmingham when I came in by train from Rugby as a teenager in the late 90s, a time when, I have to say, the city centre did not have an especially good reputation, though the extensive redevelopment that would be happening over the next 20 years had already started over in Brindley Place. The old Palisades was largely demolished, with couple of exceptions, and the whole station and shopping centre completely remodelled between 2010 and 2015. It was completely gutted, most of it. There's like 2 shops that are still there that were there when the Palisades was there. This was a period during which I regularly got completely lost while trying to get around it because all the paths and walkways kept moving.
This is Birmingham Grand Central, which is a shopping centre and complex, a food court, and it is Birmingham's main railway station, New Street Station. Ghost stories here go back to before all of this was done. There's been a huge amount of renovation over the last few years. It looks nothing like it did when I used to live here. It's completely changed. But the core of the railway station is still the same, and the platforms at the railway station are still the same, so the hauntings are probably still the same. There have apparently been numerous reported sightings of ghosts at the station. Unfortunately, this is partly because, of course, many people have lost their lives at railway stations, often at their own hands, including this one. The builders also had to move a Jewish cemetery in order to build here, so we actually have a classic example of being built on an old cemetery, except the bodies had to be moved. Apparently the most reported ghost at New Street Station is a Victorian gentleman in a top hat, who was seen so often that at the time this book was written, which was in the early noughties, staff had given him the nickname of Claude. He's been seen on platforms, but more often travelling on trains bound for Wolverhampton and Crewe. Smith and Bannister suggest that he might be the ghost of a man who had ended his own life by poisoning himself while on a train journey from Birmingham to Crewe, and perhaps that was Claude. But we will carry on from here, and it's going to start getting Christmassy as we start walking.
From the station, I actually had to walk a little way to my next destination, the House of Fraser department store on Corporation Street. You'd be forgiven for thinking the shop had closed from the outside, but it's still open just about. 3 of the upper floors have been closed, along with the cafe and the toilets, and it has become an outlet store. The store now only trades from the basement and ground floors and floors 1, 2 and 3, meaning it is impossible to test out this particular ghost story about a haunted lift.
During construction of the store in the late 1950s, a workman who had been working on the 5th floor fell down the partly constructed lift shaft and sadly died. And apparently his ghost will stop anybody entering or exiting that specific lift at the point from which he fell. One of the authors of this book, Arthur Smith, actually had a personal experience with this. He worked at the store at House of Fraser, or Rackham's as it was at the time. About 12:30 a.m, when the day's work was finished, he needed to go to his office on the 5th floor and decided to take that particular lift. He got in, pressed the button for the 5th floor, and the lift went to the 6th floor. He tried again and ended up on the 4th floor. He tried several times more and on every occasion missed the 5th floor by at least 1 floor. After that, he decided to get out of the lift and use the stairs instead. And to this day, at the time of writing the book, he has only ever used the escalator when visiting the shop.
To get to my next destination, I took the scenic route past St Philip's Cathedral and through the British part of Birmingham's Christmas market, which is already up and running even though I was filming in mid-November. You can tell this is the British bit because it includes a helter-skelter with a bar at the bottom of it. And yes, this is a functioning helter-skelter. We took my son on it last year. The British bit is only a small appendage to the main draw, which is the Birmingham-Frankfurt Christmas market, which comes every year and is the biggest authentic German Christmas market outside of Germany or Austria. I love the German market. I first discovered it when I was a first-year student at university in 2001, and my flatmates and I went for a walk to explore the city. We turned a corner and came across what looked like a fairy tale. Oldie-worldy market stalls, bright lights, a merry-go-round, and bars selling mulled wine in the middle of the city. The market has been coming to Birmingham since 1997 and is mostly very beloved. Except when you are running for a train and the pressing hordes of people day drinking at the bars are in your way. I hurt my foot that day. The heart of the market, which spreads all the way up and down New Street, that's the street, not the station, is in Victoria Square, where, by the way, I was delighted to see that the floozy in the jacuzzi is once again earning her name with a working fountain after years of being surrounded by bushes as a cost-cutting measure. Victoria Square is flanked by my next 2 destinations, the Town Hall, which opened in 1834, and the Council House.
Behind me is Birmingham Town Hall. Its design is based on an ancient Roman temple. This is haunted by an unknown Victorian gentleman who has allegedly been seen sitting by himself in a side gallery and sometimes walking along the surrounding corridors. Whenever he is approached, he disappears. Now, that's pretty much all we know about this haunting. A lot of websites will say it is the ghost of Charles Dickens. This is because Charles Dickens did his first public reading of A Christmas Carol here in Birmingham Town Hall. And as you can see from the German market all around me, on the 15th of November, we like Christmas in this city. So a lot of people think, on the basis that it is a Victorian man and Charles Dickens read A Christmas Carol here, that it must therefore be the ghost of Charles Dickens. Personally, I feel like Charles Dickens is quite recognisable, and if it was Charles Dickens, someone would have identified him as Charles Dickens. I think it's just an anonymous Victorian gentleman, but interesting nonetheless. The town hall is also apparently haunted by the ghosts of 2 workmen who died while chipping at a pillar. They were unfortunately crushed by falling masonry. And apparently at night, if you listen carefully, you can hear these gentlemen called Mr. Heap and Mr. Badger chipping away at a pillar they will never finish.
The Council House, my next stop, is on the corner of Victoria Square and Chamberlain Square, which is named for one of the city's most famous benefactors, Joseph Chamberlain. father of the well-known 1930s British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain. Joseph Chamberlain was mayor of Birmingham from 1873 to 1875 before going on to be elected to Parliament. While he was mayor, he organised plans for slum clearance in the city centre and used a combination of public and private money to build numerous public buildings, including libraries, swimming pools and schools. The museum and art gallery was enlarged and the adjoining council house was built.
The large building behind me now contains Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery, but it's also Birmingham's council house. The corner of the council house, where it leads into Victoria Square from Chamberlain Square, is the Lord Mayor's office, and it contains Joseph Chamberlain's old desk. This first floor office is separated from the rest of the Lord Mayor's parlour by a frosted glass door, and staff has said that sometimes when the Lord Mayor is out, they have seen a ghostly figure moving around the room, but when they open the door, no one is there. There is also a strong smell of fresh flowers. Apparently, Joseph Chamberlain always insisted on being surrounded by fresh flowers, particularly orchids, which he grew at his home, Highbury Hall, in King's Heath.
From the council house, it was a relatively short walk to my next stop, which was in another square, Centenary Square this time. This walk used to take you through a horribly crowded and somewhat dated small shopping centre ironically called Paradise Forum, but a few years ago it was redeveloped and opened up when the old library was torn down and the new Library of Birmingham built. That's the building that looks like a giant spirograph over there. I like it. My brother, who used to have a view of it from his window, does not. The ghost story at my next stop, Baskerville House, relates to the Priestley riots. On the 14th of July 1791, on the second anniversary of the storming of the Bastille in Paris, a group of Birmingham nonconformists met for dinner. That's Protestants who did not conform to an established church like the Church of England. An angry mob gathered outside. One of the men who organised the dinner, but didn't actually attend because he was aware of the brewing trouble, was a founding member of British Unitarianism, Joseph Priestley, who was a target and victim of the riots, not a rioter, even though the name of the riots has been taken from him. The rioters were afraid that the French Revolution might spread to Britain, and some of them seem to have got a bit confused between dissent and nonconformism and Roman Catholicism, because they were yelling no popery. Obviously, nonconformists have nothing to do with Catholics. The riots started on the 14th of July and went on for 4 days. On the 14th itself, they started by rioting at the Royal Hotel on Temple Row, where the dinner was being held. Then they went on to set fire to 2 nonconformist chapels, one of which was where Priestley was minister, and then they looted and burned down Priestley's home itself in Sparkbrook. Baskerville House as we see it today didn't exist back then. The site was the home of John Baskerville, called Easy Hill. He had died in 1775, and by 1791 it was owned by a Baptist minister called John Ryland. It was targeted and badly damaged in the riots and subsequently demolished. The current building was a civic centre built in the 1930s.
During the Priestley riots of 1791, on the evening of the 14th of July, a large mob attacked the building. The cellar was full of alcohol, and 3 of the mob decided they were going to sit around in the cellar and drink instead of carrying on rioting. Unfortunately, they were totally oblivious to the fact that Baskerville House above them had been set on fire. As a result, they sadly didn't get out in time and they lost their lives in the fire. An ex-council employee at Baskerville House believes that it is haunted by the ghosts of these 3 men. He said there were sightings of suddenly appearing shadowy figures, especially in the basement, and that these were really quite common when he worked there. And from here, it is a very short walk to my final destination for this particular ghost tour. The building behind me is the ICC, International Convention Centre, and Symphony Hall.
The ICC and Symphony Hall are considerably more recent than even the modern building of Baskerville House, having been opened in 1991.
The concert hall, Symphony Hall, has the best acoustics in Europe. I am reliably informed by my musician brother. It's used for all sorts of things. It's used for graduations, obviously for concerts. The Tory party have held their conference here several times and blocked all the roads. You can do parties, you get Christmas parties and dinner dances up there. It's used for loads of things. It is open as well, not the concert hall itself, but you can walk through, you can go to the gift shop, you can go to the coffee shop, and it's also a cut through to Brindley Place, which is an area with rather nice restaurants on the other side. It's the gift shop that is apparently haunted by a poltergeist.
I tried to go into the gift shop to check this out for myself, but it was closed. Hopefully just because there wasn't a concert or anything on, and not for good.
Apparently, on more than one occasion, when one member of staff has been on duty cashing up at the end of the day, items on display have started hurtling across the shop as if being thrown by an unseen person. And this has also been caught on CCTV. According to Smith & Bannister's source for this story, priests have even been called in 3 times to try and exorcise this spirit with no luck. And there is one more ghost story associated with not so much the building, but somebody who performed there. A woman who went to a concert by David Gates, ex-lead singer of American group Bread, who were popular in the 70s. She was watching the show and she started to see a shadowy shape appearing next to Gates. She thought her eyes must be playing tricks on her, but then she realised that this shape was beginning to develop human features, and it was following Gates around the stage and even sat at the piano with him. She asked her husband if he could see it, but he couldn't see anything. She just carried on watching until just before the end of the concert, the figure faded away to nothing. It is possible to see strange things while listening to concerts. My mom has synesthesia and sees colours when she listens to music. Seeing a human figure following a specific musician around the stage is a little bit more unusual. I think I'm going to warn my brother about that and keep an eye out for it. I hope you've enjoyed this ghost tour. If you have, please do give this video a like. Subscribe to my channel for myth, legend, folklore, ghost stories, and weird and wonderful history in general. And until next time, bye! I'm going into the ICC for a coffee before I go home.
If you like ghost stories, Freya says check out my book, Creepy Classics Ghost Stories from Ancient Rome. 13 ancient Roman ghost stories retold, available in ebook or paperback format from Amazon, and free to read with a Kindle Unlimited subscription.